Great. So, Alan, you've been using this BMI tracker for a month or two now. So, why don't you start by giving our viewers a quick overview of what this thing is?
Okay, first of all, it is a an application that doesn't require any devices like a head mount or anything of that nature. So it just runs strictly on your webcam, capturing your movements of both your eyes and your head. So it comes in two parts. The application, the iBeam application that you buy whenever you buy the product, either a subscription or a lifetime buy-in, and also another application that is a freeware type, and those two together make up the iBeam uh, product. You do have to have a webcam, but you can use iPad or iPhone if those two products have eye tracking capabilities or face recognition. So, but if you have a webcam from your computer or a separate webcam, should be good to go. There are some recommendations on the type and to make the product work better, but outside of that, just a webcam and the application, and you're good to go.
Nice. Sounds pretty straightforward, like something that most folks at home probably already have the stuff they need for this. So, why don't we just jump into the sim so you can demonstrate the overall concept and what exactly does this app give you in the sim?
Okay. So today we're in a Cirrus 22 and the Microsoft Flight Sim, and right now I've got it in just static mode. So I'm going to go ahead before I get moving my head around. I'm going to go ahead and bring up the applications here real quick just to show you what they look like, and you'll see that there's two parts. The one on the right is the actual Beam Eye Tracker app. That again, that's what you get when you buy into the subscription, and the other one on the left is the Open Tracker. So the one on the right is the one that you use to calibrate. If you look on the right side, you can see my head. It says head and eye tracking. So I'm moving my head around. You use that to calibrate it. And then inside of there, there's some other settings that helps you kind of refine some of the movements and so on. And then the open track is the device that's used that's required for it to connect to your computer in Microsoft Flight Sim, X-Plane, and I think they advertise that you can connect through this open tracker with something like 200 different games of sorts. But
I
quite
see.
a variety of flight simulators are applicable to the use of this iBeam tracker.
I gotcha. So yeah, we've got the Be My Tracker software, and then that requires this middleman. It sounds like to actually communicate with Sim, if I understood correctly.
That's correct. If you see on the left side on the open track, down in the bottom, it says input
Mhm.
iBeam. This open track connects with a lot of different applications of games and so on and so forth. So I have it selected specifically to input with the iBeam tracker. And then in here, if you look off to the right, it says profile. I have my settings for this airplane set up specifically for an SR-22. So it's quite powerful because you can go in, if you're flying a 172 one day or a Cirrus the next, you can go in and modify some of the settings to make it a little more realistic in terms of where
Mhm.
your head would be in the cockpit as you're moving around. So, and
Got
then
it.
underneath there, the options and the mapping buttons is where you really get into detailed settings for movement. It's not too difficult. It does take a little patience and a little time to play with it to find a setting that's reasonable. But the default settings that come in it will get you started okay without it being too
Mhm.
overly complicated.
All right, that makes sense. So yeah, we'll dive into some of the
Okay.
details on the setup configurations here shortly. I think would be great. So let's just take a look in the sim and
Okay.
get a feel for how this thing works as you're flying along, and what sort of benefits does it give us as a pilot.
Sure. Right now, I'm going to leave the Microsoft Sim frozen or pause for just a second, and I'm going to open up my head movement here. So it's going to go from static here now to me moving. So let's just have a look real quick before we start moving the airplane itself. So I'm sitting back in my chair. I've got it, fairly well calibrated for where I think I'd be sitting in a Cirrus here. So I'm going to pan to the
Mhm.
left here, and you can see we're out in uh, in the desert area, Palm Beach, Palm
So,
Springs. I
so if
think
I
we.
could interrupt, Alan, how much right now are you moving your eyes versus your head? And well, you can
Okay.
probably tell on the webcam a bit,
Yeah.
I suppose. But is it mostly eyes or mostly head or mix of both?
I have it set where it's mostly head with a little bit of eye
Okay.
movement, and again, it took some trial and error to kind of come up with a formula that was,
Hmm.
conducive to for me feeling like this is realistic. But you can modify how much your eyes are moving it, how much your head is moving it, and come up with a combination of the two. So right now,
Makes
I'm
sense.
going to keep my head still for a second and move my eyes. Okay, so see it moving around gently. Those are eye
Hmm.
movements only, no head. Now I'm going to keep my eyes still and move my head smoothly to the left. So again, I have it more pronounced towards a head
Hmm.
movement than an eye movement.
Okay. So the eyes will kind of create a small change in the
Yes.
your viewpoint,
Yeah.
to maybe help you focus on a particular switch, let's say, but the head is more if you're looking to, check off your left shoulder to see where the runway is on downwind or something
That's
like
right.
that.
That's right. Yeah. And
All
so
right, that
I'm
that
sitting
makes a lot of
here,
sense.
and just real quick here, I'm leaning forward too, so you can work what they're calling the XYZ axis settings in
Hmm.
it. So I'm leaning forward, which makes it fairly realistic, and then I'm looking down. So that's another
Hmm.
nice little feature of it. So I'm leaning back.
So it's not just rotation of your head; it's also if
That,
you actually move your head further towards your computer screen, you're saying it will actually zoom things in more or less. Is
that's
that
what I'm
that
doing
right?
right now. Exactly. See, so I can
Very
get
cool.
real
All right.
close and look down and then
Yep.
lean back. I'm leaning back a little too far that time, but yeah, I mean
Yeah.
it gives a little bit more realistic representation because it has
Hmm.
that move forward, move back, left and right, and then the swiveling of
Hmm.
the head as well. So quite dynamic, really.
Very cool. So let's talk a little bit about the setup without going into too many specifics on the not numerical parameters yet. We can get into that a bit more. But when you first set this up, so you have your webcam that you use for your everyday stuff on Zoom, so that's connected, and then you install these two programs. And then at that point, it pretty much just works. Is that fair to say? And then
It,
you can tweak it from there, or was there any other basic setup that you had to go through to get the thing to work in the first place?
it was fair to say that it's pretty well set up to just jump in and get started. I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna freeze my head here for a second, and I'm gonna pop up real quick the I beam again here real quick. And so I'm going to go over to settings. And once you download and you get the app, basically all of these settings will be default, so it's
Okay.
just typical. All those settings will be default. And so in here is what I was talking about. You can do your changing your how much you want your head to be influence the movement versus the eye. So it's a mix of the
Mm-hmm.
two, but everything will come in default. And so if you're satisfied with that, you do a quick calibration that as I showed you a second
Mm-hmm.
ago. Here, let me get out of there. Okay, so you do that little calibration and
Mm-hmm.
see where the eyes up here on the head tracking. You click on calibrate and you just step through. It's really easy to do, so that's no big
Okay.
deal. Then once you have that set, you download it and you bring up this. And so they'll talk to one another, but because the iBeam has a little slider
Mm-hmm.
button says anytime a one of these type of devices are opened up, then communicate with it. And so basically
Mm-hmm.
in here now you go over and then you set in the input, which is iBeam over there. So that's not too difficult to do. And over in the profile that I talked about earlier, there's a default setting in there that it'll come if I can hit that drop down box. I'm not, so that there's a default setting. Let me hit. I don't know why it's not reacting here. Whoops. That's okay. Okay, what I have to do is stop it, but let me do that real
Okay,
quick.
no worries.
So I'm going to stop it. I'm going to hit this little profile. You can create
Okay,
different configurations. And so over here, you see that default. That's what would be in there
okay,
when you first start. So you start off with that
all
default,
right.
and it's pretty much, just pretty straightforward. Um, then,
Mhm,
then you have the options section here where it goes into your output for your yaw, your pitch, and then
mhm,
roll I've got disabled because I don't move my head kind of back and
mhm,
forth, left and right too much. And then the X, Y, Z axis settings in there. So that's
got it.
kind of where you get into the details of setting what I said earlier about the movements
Mhm.
of the head, eye, forward, backwards, and stuff. And
Do
then,
you have to recalibrate this every time you start up your sim, or is it kind of once you do it, it stays pretty much set for some time?
yeah, once I made the settings like I have for the SR22, the only thing I got to be particular about is where I set my chair where I'm sitting.
Okay.
And if I get it to the same place or pretty close to it, I don't have to make any other adjustments. I'll run a calibration every time on the other app. The little eye
Mhm.
calibration. I'll run it, but outside of that, I don't go into here into OpenTrack and modify any changes. If I got my seat right and I calibrated my head,
Mhm.
you're good to go. I haven't really had to struggle with resetting
All right.
a lot, and that's one of the things I like about it because I don't I don't like to have to tinker with it too much if I want to run the game and do some flying.
Yeah, that sounds pretty straightforward.
Yeah,
Now let's talk about benefits for as pilots in a sim. How can this help us? I mean, what
sure.
compared to controlling the sim how you were before you had this app, which I assume was primarily with a mouse or maybe using some hat switch on your yoke.
Hmm.
What is the advantage of this?
Well, clearly, let's just say one advantage would be if you're going to be doing pattern work, as we're kind of set up here, at the airport. You can see the airport off the left. We're in a left downwind
Hmm.
for a runway here. And so, therefore, if I'm doing pattern work, instead of me having to do what you said, toggle or do some hat switch type of movements and stuff, it's just I can look smoothly out there. It does take a little practice to
Hmm.
get your head to slow down some, because it's quite
Uh,
reactive. But I can kind of visualize myself on my downwind pretty good. Go back to my straightforward view, and so I'm just going to go ahead and unpause here for just a second. I've got it on autopilot. So, whoops, hang on just a minute. Let me do this. There we go. All right, so here we are flying downwind, and I'm just looking at my orientation for my downwind positioning. And so, again, just kind of moving my head back and forth like I would.
yeah, this is perfect. You can really practice the scan pattern you need to.
Exactly. So that's a great feature in my opinion.
Hmm.
And looking for that downwind, a beam that we're all accustomed to start our
Hmm.
configuration protocol for our pattern work. And so it's pretty smooth. And then if I need to look down a little bit here, if I can do that right to get my flaps set, okay, and then
Hmm.
look back up. So that's helpful. There's still some things that you have to do, with your mouse and so on, I'm sure. But with regard
Right.
to minimizing some button pushing, I think that's a real good attribute.
Great. So yeah, it definitely seems like for any student pilots or anyone flying VFR that this is, if you're not going to invest in a VR headset or any sort of wraparound monitors, then this is probably a really good idea to at least try. And how about on the IFR side of things? Would you say that there's much benefit for people that are flying IFR or any specific maneuvers or anything that you might be doing where it could help out?
Yeah, I think maybe a partial panel work, where you're having just, a focus on a specific area, but maybe the
Hmm.
instruments, for example, there's in this particular case, my standby instruments in this configuration are down there, between my knees, in the Cirrus in this
Right.
particular case. And so therefore, sometimes on a fixed screen, you have to toggle down to kind of even see them, but so in this
Hmm.
case I can kind of look down, use them, and then kind of look up gently and look over to the other side and then go back down to my standby. So I think that might be a little more realistic and a little bit better for scan development,
Hmm.
and from instead of having to push a button to kind of toggle.
Right. Okay, great. And then when you're flying the sim, Alan, have you noticed any performance impacts? Has it dropped in your frame rate much, or has it been not much of an issue there?
A little bit. I think I've detected in Microsoft on my system a maybe three or so frame rate,
Okay.
deficit, and about the same over on X-Plane. I've run it on X-Plane 11 and X-Plane
Hmm.
12 as well, and so not too much of a frame rate degradation, I don't think.
Okay. Sounds good. Now on the setup, it sounds like a lot of these settings might be quite a bit of personal preference, or maybe they're going to depend on how big your monitor is in terms of, okay, how much do you want to move your head to see a given angle out the window type thing. But why don't you just walk us through maybe a few of the key adjustments that you came up with on the settings that made it a better experience for you? Maybe we have two apps. I'm not sure where the primary settings are, if they're primarily in the beam app or in the
Okay.
open track, but why don't you just highlight a few settings that you feel might help other folks?
Sure. First of all, let me put a plug out for their Discord community they've got on there, because I did go over and look into that, because there's people
Mm-hmm.
in there that are providing insight on settings for this. Because remember, this thing also is used for race car advocates and all
Mm-hmm.
kinds of games and stuff. So there is a section in there for flight simulators as well. So I did get a little bit of help going over there when I got
Mm-hmm.
into this in the beginning. So that was very helpful just to get me jump started on it a little bit. So there is some help, in their little Discord community over there. So put that plug in for them as well.
Awesome.
But anyway, going back to the kind of the initial settings, I'm gonna I'm I'm gonna go ahead and pull back up the Beam app itself, and so I'm going to go up to the settings section up here, and the big thing that I have done that's helped me a lot was I reduced my eye movement settings, because to me it was just a little bit too quick and hard to keep up with. So
Mm-hmm.
if you look up here on the very top, head tracking filtering, I had to run that all the way up to 100. It will be in a default setting of about 50. Almost all of these default slider bars will be about 50. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's just where I found it. I wanted it to filter out and kind of null out. I really don't have the technical words for it to describe it, but
Mm-hmm.
so basically that's the formula that I came up with, so that it's tracking both my head and my eyes. You can see it's set here for both eyes, so you can do all kinds of adjustments
Interesting.
to it. But in the
uh,
bottom down here, I have the predominance of the settings set for my head. And you can
mm-hmm.
see I've got about 87, 65 for pitch. And then eye tracking responsiveness is the one that I had to mess with quite a bit. And I just found in this particular airplane, way down there about 7, not getting rid of it
Okay.
totally was kind of a go-to setting for me from that standpoint. So that would be that one, and there's not many more any more settings per se
Mm-hmm.
to deal with on the Beam Eye app itself. And then that Open Tracker. Now again, this was the one that took a lot more time on my part to try to
Mm-hmm.
figure out. Whoops, wrong one. Let me go back over to the next one up, the option section here. Because again, this goes in this little output tab right here. This goes
Mhm.
into the to how much you want it to detect and move with regard to several parameters. The yaw, of course, that in this particular case, that would be, the left right movement, the pitch up and down, the roll there. I took it out. That would be like if you took your head and rolled it over to your left shoulder and head over to the right shoulder. I disabled that
Mhm.
because I
I
just don't
see.
move that
Yeah.
way in the cockpit.
Right.
So,
Right.
but I do yaw my head left and right, and I do pitch my
Yeah.
head up and down. So that's how that works. Then they take it into the x-axis. Now that would be if you're sitting in the seat and you move your whole body left and right,
Mhm.
which you do a little bit. I messed around with that, but I just disabled it because it just wasn't enough to, because I found myself outside the cockpit and,
Mhm.
and
Right.
detail
I see.
things like that. So anyway,
Yeah.
but the one that I did set was that z-axis. The z-axis in this particular case would be
Mhm.
moving my body forward, leaning forward and leaning back. And that's why you saw it respond that way when I was moving earlier. So,
Got it.
in that
Mhm.
particular case, what you have to do is you go in, you select this, to make it where it's not disabled. And then after
Mhm.
you select it, you say, okay. And then you go over to the mapping section over here and you go over to the Z axis. And now you can see me moving, seeing the top up there, the
Mhm.
little ball moving. And so
I
you,
see.
yeah. And
So it
that's
gets limited at a certain point where it's not going to keep going forward and
that's
forward. It probably
it,
gets limited at that 25 mark.
Yes, and you can bend these things. There's all kinds of fancy things
Okay.
that you can do to make it even better if you really have a lot of time and you really want to filter it. You can bend the curves, which will kind of slow the reaction down ever so slightly.
Mhm.
I'm just not an expert to that extent. I just kind of know that if you do mess with it a little bit, you can really continue to refine it in these graphical option
Mhm.
settings over here. Um,
Okay.
but basically, I've got the yaw set right here, and that would be my head turning left and right, and the pitch up and down, and the roll I don't
Mhm.
have, the X and the Y, but the Z I do have. So, once you get those set, it's, pretty much it. You get those set, and you hit the start button,
Mhm.
and it starts the motion.
Nice. So yeah, it seems a little less intimidating now. I wasn't quite sure what to expect, but basically, it's a matter of fine tuning it for the airplane in the OpenTrack software to make sure that you're not going to exceed the limits of the cockpit dimensions and things like that, and maybe disabling axes that don't really make sense for what you're doing, like the roll of your head, like this here. So
Hmm.
yeah, the overall looks pretty straightforward to get set up. So thank you for walking us through that. And if folks want to purchase this, so the OpenTrack, you said that was completely free open source software, I believe, and then the Beam software. This is something that is a paid. Was it one time you said, or it
Uh,
is a subscription?
I bought the one time. I think without having it in front of me, I think the subscription was $4.99 a month.
Mm-hmm.
Or the option to do a lifetime, which was $29.99, and so I just did the
I see.
$29.99. But I guess the thing is, the beauty of the monthly is if you could pay $4.99 and use it for a
Mm-hmm.
month, and if you don't like it, then you're not committed
Right.
to
Right.
spending the extra money, which I guess is fair. But
Mm-hmm.
I just that being an instructor, I just found that it might be useful for me to just go ahead and buy into it and use it and share it
Mm-hmm.
if it's helpful for other sim enthusiasts.
Right. So you said roughly 30 a month. I mean, at that price point, your thoughts on value for money, and if this is something that's worth investing in for the folks that you've been training on Flight Sim Coach, if this is something that you've been considering recommending now.
Yeah. Again, $4.99 a month or $29.99. I think it is for a lifetime. So, not too deep of an investment in my opinion, but definitely again, working with students that are doing pattern work, I think,
Mhm.
for buying it maybe for a couple of months, if nothing else, to just have a little bit
Mhm.
better opportunity to work on pattern work without it being as cumbersome. If especially if a
Mhm.
student is in that phase of flight and they've got a single monitor and they feel that the simulator is restricting them a little bit, I think this is a
Right.
good open
Mhm.
opportunity to kind of give them an extra feature without it being overly
Mhm.
expensive that is directly applicable to what they're trying to do in their sim
Mhm.
training. Again, using pattern work as an example.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I mean, I can see this addressing a lot of the issues that, crop up with private pilot training that we kind of caution people. It's a bit tough to practice. Pattern work is one of them,
Mhm.
but also maybe engine failure procedures where you have to kind of be looking at things that are down on the center pedestal by your feet, and doing that in a way that's not going to distract you from flying the airplane.
Yeah,
Just like with the VR headset, how you can just move your head. Same thing here, and it will. Make that a lot easier, or maybe some ground reference maneuvers to be able to check, off out the window and go back looking
exactly.
forward, because that's one of the big things with ground reference maneuvers is just being able to divide that attention. So yeah, I could see this being a huge benefit for that sort of thing as well.
Exactly. Yep.
Great. So anything else that I didn't ask that you'd like to share with other pilots about this, or did we pretty much cover it?
I think we pretty much covered it. Again, I think value wise, going back to your last question, I think it's a good value depending on what you're looking for, but
Mm-hmm.
not a lot involved, both financially and mechanics wise. So that's
Right.
always a good thing,
Hard to
I
go
guess,
wrong. At
from a
least to give
value
it a try,
perspective. Yeah,
and
yeah,
maybe if you're thinking about a VR headset, this would be a good intro to the
yeah,
concept and some of the benefits that you get, and you pay $5 or $30, however you do it, and get a feel. And if you feel like this is going to help you a lot and you like it, maybe this is enough, or maybe you go the VR route and you get that
sure,
full immersion with all the same type of benefits. So
exactly. Hmm.
yeah. Great. Well, thank you, Alan, for sharing your insights with us, and thank you all you guys for joining us today. If you've used the Beam Eye Tracker yourself or any similar eye tracking or head tracking software, we'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments. Also, if you'd like to fly with Alan or any of our other remote instructors, feel free to message us on flightsimcoach.com and we can set you up with an appointment with Alan. But until next time, this is Mike from Flight Sim Coach and wishing you safe flying.